Hey, alumni. Welcome to InterVarsity World Changers, the podcast celebrating God's world-changing work in and through InterVarsity alumni like you. I'm your host, John Steele, and today we're talking with Shang Saavedra of Save My Sense, an alumna from Harvard and the University of Chicago Booth School of Business. And Shang is changing the world through her expertise in the interaction of mental and financial health. We're going to hear more about her financial journey, the way she's helping others pursue financial health, and about her new book, Wealth is a Mindset. Change Your Mind, Change Your Money. Thanks for tuning in and enjoy Shang's story. Yes, I am excited to be hanging out with you, and I'll say excited to be hanging out with you again. You and I have done some podcasting together on a different podcast, a different alumni podcast, and so it is super fun to get to be right back here with you again.
It feels like we have been longtime friends just having a chat right now.
Exactly. And that is exactly what I hope for in these moments. Shang, as I've said, you and I have gotten to know each other a little bit, but maybe some of our listeners on this podcast don't know you yet. So would you take just a minute to introduce yourself and help us get to know you?
Of course. My name is Shang. I am the founder and owner of the company Save My Sense, where my mission is to change people's money lives 1 cent at a time by focusing on the connection between mental health and financial wealth.
Hmm. Yes. And you've been on a journey with the Lord as it comes to finances, as it comes to mental health, as it comes to your own story around these things and helping people with their story. Before we get into that, though, I want us to go back to your days with InterVarsity. As an alumni podcast, one of the things we have a lot of fun doing is talking about the good old days on campus with InterVarsity. So you're an alumna. Tell us the story of how you came to meet InterVarsity.
Of course. I was very lucky to have been a Christian since I was a child. My parents and I grew up in the church. And so I knew that I had always wanted to join a fellowship in college. InterVarsity was one of the first to knock on my door. Throughout the years, I served as Bible study small group leader. I also was the praise band leader. And even after graduating, I happened to work for the first 3 years nearby. So always try to keep in touch with the undergrads and just see how things are going. And to this day, my husband and I continue to support InterVarsity because we also met through InterVarsity in grad school at University of Chicago. So yeah, InterVarsity is kind of our life.
That is awesome. I also met my wife through grad school when I was in grad school and was hanging out with InterVarsity as a student. I didn't know a place of overlap that you and I had is that we both have worship leading experience. I cut my teeth in worship leading as an InterVarsity student and still continue to do that today. I didn't know that was something that you did too.
Oh, fun. Well, you probably can still play, an instrument well. I've actually lost a lot of that touch and need to get back on my piano at
Okay.
some point.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really fun. Well, as you think about your days with InterVarsity, is there like a standout moment or story or experience that really kind of paints a picture of what that time was like for you?
Gosh, it's so hard to encapsulate that in one moment. I think what really comes to mind for me is the word family. I'm an only child, and I don't even have anybody other than my parents living in the US. I'm a Chinese American. Most of my family is abroad in either China or Australia. And InterVarsity and all my classmates felt like my brothers, my sisters, and just my, kind of replacement family on campus. And perhaps I had some attachment issues too, but it was just nice knowing that we all loved the same God and would be there for each other through life. And I find that to still be the case today whenever I meet with any of my InterVarsity friends.
Yes, I have to say that you are among good company when it comes to people that I've chatted with on this podcast in the past or in our other alumni podcast After Four. So often the thing that comes up for people is the community, the family experience that they had there, and that so much of their transformative experiences happened in the context of community. And like these people, we did a ton together and our lives were transformed together in this space. And that's really what stands out to me. And in some ways, those are the things that I really miss the most. So Shang, also, as we were students with InterVarsity, we talked a lot about InterVarsity's vision of seeing lives transformed, campuses renewed, world changers developed. And here on this podcast, unsurprisingly, that idea of world changer, that's what we spend a lot of time leaning into, and sort of asking the question and continuing to map out together what that means for alumni like you to be a world changer. And we've sort of landed on two big ideas of what it means to be an InterVarsity world changer, and that's a formative experience with InterVarsity, first of all, and then second, that it's someone who's continuing to grow in their love for God, His Word, His people, and His purposes. That sort of encapsulates for us the idea of InterVarsity world changer, and I'm excited to hear more about your journey, excited for you to tell us the story that you've been on, especially as it relates to personal finance and mental health. And this is a story that goes in many different directions, that is not just for you, but is for other people as well. But I want to start with you and your story. So as far back as is helpful to go, just tell us, take us on this journey. What led to this pursuit of the work optional life that you have right now, and the just the perspective and the work that you're doing with finance and mental health? Like, where did this all come from?
Yeah. And that same question was posed to me as well by my publisher as I was writing my book. And actually, I happened to at the same time had my parents ship a bunch of things out of storage back to me, including all of my middle school and high school diaries. Oh, what a trip! What a trip! And I saw glimpses of my story coming out of childhood. And that's actually where my book begins too, which is asking, where did your journey in finance come from? So for me, it was actually rooted in being a person who was bullied. So imagine 10, 11, 12-year-old Shang. She's tiny. I'm very short and did not get much of a growth spurt through most of my childhood years. Not only is she short, she's a nerd. She loves to learn. She's excited about learning, kind of became a teacher's pet, doesn't see homework as something that's annoying. And so if you add small stature, nerdiness, and then in some contexts, I don't think this was the main factor, but also the fact that I'm Chinese American, so I'm an immigrant. I don't look like the vast majority of Americans. I stood out. I was a target of bullying basically from for as long as I could have remembered, all the way through most of high school. That put me in such a lonely place. And my diary was dark. It was sad. It was just, asking God for. I am a believer at that point. So it's like, God, like, when is this going to end? I couldn't physically fight back against anyone. So at some point in high school, I wrote the Shang Manifesto, which was, I'm going to show these bullies what I'm going to be made of when I make it. So I had this whole manifesto where I was like, I already was, but I would be a top student. I would get into, I don't think I named Harvard, but I think I said I would get into a top college. I would come out and get a good job, make a lot of money, and come back and be the richest person at our reunion. And that's how I was going to show up to everybody. And I did go on to fulfill that manifesto. I went to Harvard College for undergrad. I studied economics. Back then, I got my first job was management consulting, which is a very high paying job. To this day, it still is. And then I went on to the top business school program at the time, University of Chicago Booth School of Business. And I felt like I was on this path to fulfilling that manifesto, to show all my childhood bullies that I'm not to be messed with, that I'm going to be famous and written about, all of that. And as part of this, my immigrant parents taught me how to keep a budget, how to avoid credit card debt. And because I was quantitative as a person, with my very first paycheck, I knew how to start saving money. And I learned very quickly how to invest it. On top of that, I had the privilege of not graduating with any student loans. So that gave me a huge head start as well. And throughout all of this, I never paused to think about, well, what does this actually have in terms of my mental health? I never did. I just saw everything as you do everything in order to sacrifice and achieve this singular goal of being worldly successful. It started crumbling, I would say. I mean, there were little crumbles here and there, different things happen, like your first romantic breakup and all of that. But I think it really crumbled around the time that I was 28, 29. I was working a corporate job, but I had a lot of friends in the entrepreneurial space. And many of them started getting nominated to this list called the Forbes 30 Under 30, which honestly, it's an arbitrary list of people that this magazine thinks are going to be amazing and famous and good at their work. I was 28, I was 29. I was like, shoot, I didn't make it. And for some weird reason, that was the main catalyst that led me to question everything that I was working towards. I was like, what's the point of this? What's the point of this? Why did I do all of this when nothing seems to matter? And at the same time, my husband and I had gotten married, and I committed with him to live off of the lower of our two incomes while living in New York City so that we would not fear the parenting penalty. Like, we wanted to become parents, and we didn't want to fear the impact of becoming a parent on our earning power, or maybe even unemployment or paternal or maternal leave, things like that. So all this meant that by age 28, 29, I was living very frugally, saving a lot, investing a lot, and feeling like none of this mattered. Like, I didn't matter because I didn't make it onto that list. And that's when I realized that my very warped view of the world and of myself was rooted in this mental health issue that I was having that came from my childhood, because all the time growing up, I had been fully convinced that I didn't matter unless I achieved all these things. And so I had to let the grace of God back into my life. Even though I was a believer, I didn't fully understand that grace. Start loving myself. And at the same time, by doing so, I also became more at peace with how frugal I had been. I was like, okay, this is towards a worthy goal of creating a family and not making this family creation journey be the source of so much stress, and come to peace with that. By age 31, I had finished saving for my retirement at that time based on my forecast and calculations. I'm done. I was done, which meant that the first hurdle was done. And I started writing about this, blogging about this, and eventually that turned into Save My Sense, the company today, because lo and behold, I had a health scare after birthing my second child. Not the first one, it's the second child that actually led to an ICU visit, of all things. And that's when I really kind of looked at everything. My husband was like, do you need another sign? Like, maybe this corporate life isn't for you. And I was in a corporate job at that point, trying to climb the corporate ladder. I was like, yeah, what's the point? What's the point of all of this? What's the point of having all of this wealth and resources if you're trying to be somebody that you're not, in your work? And I was like, maybe I should just quit it. And I got my book deal at that same time. So again, God had a hand in all of this timing, sent me the book deal. That was a huge sign. I was like, okay, God, you told me, I gotta go. I sent in my resignation after my maternity leave. Didn't really matter anyway, because I didn't get paid for most of it. Began writing my book. And now I see myself as hopefully the world changer who can impact people one by one to help improve their finances. Because if I improve somebody's finances, I can improve their outlook on many aspects of their lives.
Yeah, wow, Shung, you're already starting to hit on so many of the things that I want to know more about here, and that it's just, but I'll pause for a moment because I think it's just really fascinating to hear how your journey has evolved over time, or even the the motivation behind your journey, that it almost starts off as this revenge story that, what's that saying, like the best revenge is good living or something like that, something to that extent of like, I'll show them by being the absolute best.
Kind of like a
And
superhero
uh,
origin story, except I don't have any
yes,
superpowers.
exactly. That so much of it oftentimes starts off as, I want to believe well-meaning, but maybe misguided. Of like, I'll show these people, and that's what motivates you forward, and that from there it even either transitions or it grows into now beyond just showing them, like I want to make a name for myself, and then beyond that it was this very noble desire of I want our family to have space so that if our family grows, which we want to, that we don't have to have any fear or anxiety around that, which is like that's really great. But that even beyond that there was another step, which was that almost seems like God knocking at the door of, I have something more than revenge or a name for yourself or even a family. I have an actual calling for you that doesn't just change your life, but has the potential to change the lives of so many other people. And that it was when you started stepping into that calling that's when it really felt like things started to shift for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think every time that I question it, I have to stop and pray and ask God. It's like, give me another sign. I need reassurance. My faith is
Yes.
really bad.
Oh, but what a great reminder for us that you said that you finished saving for retirement at 31 years old, which like I think for many people would feel like the ultimate financial win, but that
Mhm.
even in that place, it's this reminder of like, okay, but my assurances need to come from God, not from what my not from what my Vanguard says or what wherever you're investing your retirement accounts and things like that. What does it look like for the Lord to be the one who consistently affirms my calling and my identity, and not what my financial statements say? Even though those are great, like that's great, that's a win too. But those things can ebb and flow, and they certainly will. But what will not ebb and flow is the way that God feels about you.
Well, maybe on top of that, maybe I'm just also just somebody who's very doubtful. Like every time you bring that up, I think about Gideon in the Bible who wanted, you know, a sign. I'm putting out some fleece. Do something with that. And it's interesting that I think God showed me many, many miraculous signs in my life, but perhaps in some ways my eyes just chose not to interpret them in the correct way. And so also increasingly, like if God's thinking, okay, she kind of didn't hear me right that time, I gotta do it in a different way. And I do joke that um my health issues, the ICU visit, was probably the clearest sign that God could have sent me. Because he's like, I gotta knock her physically on the ground. She doesn't get it.
Sometimes we need that. Sometimes we need those things. That's for sure. Now, Shung, you have a book which I want to return to in just a little bit. Like, I want to hear more about this book that you've mentioned. You have online courses and coaching that you're doing. You're angling towards like 200,000 followers on Instagram. No big deal. So clearly, this isn't just about you and your own financial freedom and your family's ability to kind of call the shots in your life. That this is about more than just you all. So when and you started to talk about this a little bit, but like take us that next layer deeper of like, when did this journey start to transition to being about the mental health and financial well-being of others?
Yep. So when I was 31, that's 2016. reaching financial independence meant that my husband and I were a little bit more open to traveling a little bit more now that the budget doesn't have to be that stringent. And in 2016 through 2018, we actually did a lot of travel within the United States to national parks, which are absolutely beautiful
Hmm.
places, but these are also extremely rural places. And our driving takes us past very economically depressed areas. And I, up to this
Hmm.
time, just think about where I have been living, fancy suburbs of Boston, then Chicago, but the heart of Chicago, then San Francisco during the tech boom, then New York City. I'd only seen wealth around me. I hadn't seen depression. And when I
Yeah.
saw those
Wow.
places, I was like, oh my goodness, I now understand why people vote the way they do when they don't feel like finances are going well with them. And then I had
Hmm.
been playing with other ideas for entrepreneurship at the time, um, to as far as an interesting one where I was like, oh, because I was a victim of bullying, I'm going to start a camp for girls who are victims of bullying, even though I had no idea how to run a camp. My husband kiboshed that pretty quickly. Um, and I was like, what about people's pocketbooks? What about their money? My husband and I
Hmm.
clearly did something that I don't think most people did. So let's start writing about it. Let's just see what people have to say in reaction to what I have to say. So I started writing on Instagram on at that time when people didn't really use Instagram other than fashion and photos. Like now, like there's a
Yeah.
whole cottage industry of content creators and information, and
Yes.
Instagram's a medium. Back then, it wasn't like this. So I was one of the first. And yeah, people started getting interested, asking for coaching. I did not have a formal coaching program, but I was like, I'll, take anybody. We'll just try this out. And the first thing that I did back then, because that's what I did, was I asked everybody to create a budget. And I helped them with it. I would check in with people. And half the time it just went nowhere. People wouldn't respond
Hmm.
back. They wouldn't put in their numbers. I was like, oh, why do people not understand? You need a budget so they can save money, so they can, get debt free. And it was really fascinating. At one point, one of the early clients said, I'm really sorry. I'm having depression right now. And this is just not top of mind. And a light bulb went off. I was like, wait, what if there's actually a huge mental health component, and that if you're depressed, it just makes it harder for you to what to deal with finances? I started asking, going forward, all of my new clients, I started asking about, hey, are you getting treated for any mental health issues and whatnot? And I realized there's a very, very strong pattern between people's mental health and how dedicated or willing or even how well they were doing on their financial journeys. Like it was just higher levels of credit card debt, higher levels of impulsive spending, and a greater sense of doom and gloom around money when I encountered a client who was actively depressed or anxious. I was like, there's a link here. Who else is talking about this? No one? No one? Okay, I'm going to talk about it. And so I
Wow.
started really changing my content to be on mental health. I actually started reading neuro uh, neurobiology and psychology papers on PubMed to try to see if other scientists had made this link. And I was shocked that there were some links, but maybe because of the way that scientists are funded, no one could really, put all these pieces together. Like there would be like short-term psychological experience, like, oh, if you were told this, you are more likely to pay $1 extra under this experiment. I was like, okay, great, very, very limited experiment. But there,
Right.
over time, I found enough in the body of research to be like, we need to talk about money as a symptom, like healthcare, because people's money problems are a symptom. And when there's money problems, there's a root issue, a root disease that we actually need to address. And many, many times that root disease is some form of a mental illness.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. It's really interesting to think about, like when you think about people with poor spending habits or they're having trouble financially, it seems like the root cause that you sort of stop at is, well, they just haven't been trained, or they're sloppy with tracking their purchases, or they just need more training. And to think like, actually, I mean, those things could be true. It's not necessarily mutually exclusive, but like that could be true. But also, what if there is another layer deeper than that, and we're actually talking about mental health issues that are driving some of these things, and this is a symptom that needs to have something a layer deeper treated than just, well, you need more training on how to be neat and tidy with your finances.
And I think this ties so strongly to the gospel as well.
Hmm.
Because if you think about the way that God looks at us, he doesn't see us as, oh, you're the person who had $100,000 of debt, or you're that person who cannot budget for the life of you. He often says, look, life is just broken. The essence
Hmm.
of all the problems is actually sin. And so, in a similar way, if you struggle with finances, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're bad at money. In fact, I
Hmm.
spend like several chapters of my book debunking that mindset, which is you're not bad at money, you're not stupid, you don't have a moral
Hmm.
failing if you have debt or can't get an emergency fund together. You are deserving of love, and you're
Hmm.
a great person just as you are today. That's the gospel. My book is not a overtly Christian book, but a lot of the gospel informs it. But let's talk about the root issue, sin, and let's start from self forgiveness. We're gonna forgive that past, all that shame that you felt around money. Let's forgive it, wipe that slate clean, and start with who you are now, and let's work going forward like that.
Yeah. Yeah, well, okay, then let's keep following this trail with your book. So at some point, the decision, as we said, your vision for the ways that God is leading you continues to expand into, like, this is a calling, and I want you to have an impact on other people. You and your husband are traveling around because of some of the financial freedom that you all are experiencing, and even in the midst of that, God is revealing other layers of society to you that is opening your heart to other people. You start developing some of this content, and then at some point, this book enters the scene. I mean, keep telling. Like, where did this book come from? What was sort of the moment that made you say, "I think my next step is writing a book"? and tell us a little bit more about the direction that you've taken this book.
So if you put me back into Manifesto Shang always knew that towards a path of power, you need to write a book. I mean, every presidential candidate has written a book, every major speaker, all CEOs. I was like, okay, a book is going to be in my life one day. And I even talked previously to other nonfiction authors to understand the process of getting a book. And I didn't want to self-publish it. I was like, to be quote unquote legitimate, you need a book that's published by a publisher. And most of them said you need to get a book agent and put together the book proposal. And it kind of just fell to the wayside because I was like, I don't have time for this. I don't even know where to find a book agent. I'm not going to do this. So I kind of laid the thought to rest, and I was okay with it. I was like, okay, book is not in my future. So now fast
Hmm.
forward to middle of 2022. At this point, I was probably second to third trimester with my second. So imagine I'm like lying on my bed late at night, trying to fall asleep with this giant belly on me, browsing my phone. And then in comes this message through Instagram from a acquaintance slash friend of mine from college who also was InterVarsity, by the way. She goes, "Hey, Shao, have you ever thought about writing a book?" I'm like, that's weird. I never really told anyone about this. Turns out this alumni and friend of mine was co-founding a new publishing house focused on Asian American Pacific Islander authors. And
Wow.
as part of their initial like slate of like wish list authors, she actually literally wrote me down as like she's gonna be somebody that we're gonna have like do a book with. And so over several conversations and understanding how this worked, then I had my baby. So that there was a pause in that. 3 months postpartum, I had finished my book pitch, sent it in, and then so this now brings us to spring of 23. Summer of 2023 was when I had my official book deal in hand. God.
Wow.
God caused this to happen.
Oh my goodness, that is amazing. And as you've been talking, the book really leans into the connection between finance and mental health.
Absolutely. On top of the research that I'd already been doing on PubMed, I also reached out to several mental health experts, licensed therapists, academics at different colleges to also get their perspective on this link and sort of my takeaways from the research. And in the book, essentially, I distill it down to three root causes that explain about 80 to 90% of money problems, problematic money behaviors that people might have. And I summarize them as feast and famine, adverse events, scarce immigrants. And the book will go more into this, but to summarize, feast and famine is you grew up in a paycheck to paycheck, low income household, and that often causes you to see your parents as being very impulsive. And so you also become impulsive as an adult. Adverse events is where your parents negatively used money and resources to be conditional. They actually made their love conditional for you and therefore their money and resources. So you grow up with a very warped version of your own identity. And then later on in life, you use achievement or you use your spending or you abuse something in your life to try to seek your own identity and try to define it. And this is where we see very erratic behavior. It could be somebody who's a complete workaholic. I have some of those tendencies because not my parents, but my bullies made me feel like I wasn't worthy enough. Or you might see somebody who just like hangs on to a lot of money because that's their security. Or you see somebody spending a lot on luxury and aesthetic treatments to try to make them feel and look like their best. The third one, scarce immigrant, relating primarily to immigrant families, is you have parents who immigrated into the US for economic and political reasons. So they took a huge risk to leave their country of origin. They don't want their children to take the same risks. So you grow up actually with parents who are good savers, but they tell you don't take risk, don't take risk, don't take risk. So as an adult, you often avoid investing because it sounds risky. And you also avoid risk taking in your career. In many cases, this might mean that you don't actually further your career ahead because you're not willing to go out and job seek and negotiate and increase your income. And the book basically teaches a technique grounded in psychology on how to overcome these backgrounds and the mindsets that these situations form, and then apply that to your personal finances.
So this sounds like almost find yourself in these chapters somewhere, and then I have so we can identify sort of where you've come from, and that we can work together on paving a path forward into greater health.
Yes, absolutely. And then I have very practical chapters on like getting debt free, how to raise your income,
Hmm.
how to lower your expenses, create a budget, how to invest. But like the first half of the book, it's like, let's figure out your mindset. And then I'll
Yes.
tell you all the details. But if you don't change your mindset, you're not going to listen to the second half, the
Yes.
practical stuff.
Yes, that there is a not only a change of behavior, but that there is a change of heart and a change of mindset that needs to happen. There's like internal work that needs to happen so that it can be lived out in a more healthy and real way outwardly.
Yeah, just like if we don't accept the love of Jesus Christ into our hearts, then how are we
Mm,
going to be expected to actually live out the lives that would be glorifying to God? Like we wouldn't buy into any of that. We wouldn't have a reason to be living our
right.
lives as a Christian. So same thing.
Yeah.
If you actually want to do something about your money, you have to change the way that you think about it.
Hmm. This is fantastic. I mean, this it feels the next question that I'm going to ask feels like the answer is obvious, but I'm going to ask it anyways because I think that it's because it's such a powerful thing that you are doing, and that's how do you see God at work in the world around you as you do as you do these things, as you journey with him in this calling that he has placed in your life, like what are the actual world changer ramifications that we spent all that time thinking about as students with InterVarsity, and like how is he working that out in you now through this calling that he's put on your life?
Yeah. Some of the coaching clients that I have come to me in moments of extreme crisis.
Mm.
Separation and divorce is the top reason why I work with a lot of women.
Wow.
Layoff or fear of layoffs. Um, I have several clients who are on disability pay because their job caused them to have physical or mental health issues, so they can no longer work.
Mm.
I also have clients who, in the beginning, they don't realize that they have mental health issues. They just say, Shang, I'm really struggling with money, help me. Knowing that I know all this stuff on mental health. And over time, as I work with them, I'm like, please try getting diagnosed. And many of them come out, it's like, oh my gosh,
Mm.
Shang, I didn't know. I do have depression. I do have anxiety, or not even
Wow.
those two. I have ADHD, and now I can get it treated and get it managed. And when their brains are now being treated, like I see mental health, it should be as normalized as somebody saying I have the flu or I have a
Yeah.
stomach ache. You're gonna go see the doctor and figure it out, or you're gonna eat some medicine or do it. But people don't tend to see that in the same way for mental health, because when someone says they have a mental health issue, it's often interpreted as you have a personality issue or you're not thinking straight.
Mm.
But when literally your brain
Wow.
is an organ and it needs a doctor, it
Yeah.
needs medicine. So now that I've been coaching people and I try to follow them up with them once a year, but they also write me back. I have people who come back and say, oh my goodness, like I see hope. I'm making it through my divorce and I don't have to go into
Mm.
more debt. That's really good. I've had people who didn't think they were going to get laid off, but there are layoffs happening right now. And because we've done some work, they have enough savings so they can job search for a couple months without relying on
Yeah.
credit cards. That's huge. Like that's what savings
Yes.
are for. I've had people who come back and say, I just no longer feel that like overwhelming sense of dread and fear around money.
Mm.
Like they have a plan, they know what to do, they don't question themselves as much anymore. And they're starting to see themselves as wealth builders, as
Mm.
investors. Like words, they said, many of them say, I grew up never having met a rich person, never
Mm.
having met somebody who would be considered financially successful. And now I'm realizing I might be that first one in my family, in my community. And so again, not all my clients are Christian, but I do have many Christian clients as well. But you're seeing that the love for themselves is coming back. Like many of them have been
Mm.
beaten down and broken by circumstances where they don't feel worthy. And I'm hoping that through my work, God can speak to them and be like, you are worthy of my love. Let's receive
Mm.
it, you know?
Yeah, yeah. And I really love that money. So I mean, money is a powerful thing. And there's a lot of power that can be wrapped up in it that can take us down some really dangerous, unhealthy, just like in many different ways, bad places because of the importance that we put on it, or the way that we think about it, the power that we give to it. And what I love is that you're taking that thing that can so often be viewed fearfully, or like I need to keep this under wraps or whatever it might be, and that like that you're at work with God redeeming this thing
Yes.
and turning it into using it as a tool for becoming healthier and seeing yourself more clearly like the way that God sees you, and using it as a way to sort of leverage people into a better life that is not wrapped up in money, but that has used money to launch them into a safer, healthier, better place. And that is like the part of the calling that God has placed on your life and has sort of led you into, and as is at work with you in.
I refer to the parable of the talents a lot when people
Yes.
ask me about my relationship to money as a Christian,
Hmm.
because literally the abundance mindset is in the Bible, specifically written out as it relates to money. money is one of the most most mentioned topics in the Bible.
Mm.
Actually, I think it's
Yes.
mentioned more than maybe the word faith, perhaps. Don't
There
quote me on
are
this.
many, either way, there are many passages of scripture that refer to money.
Yes,
Lots.
because God recognizes the intoxicating effect it has on people. That perhaps it's
Yes.
probably one of the biggest tools that the devil has to take us. But the Bible has never said money was evil. It's the love of money, making money our idol. That's the evil part of it. And I love the parable of the talents because it showed the servant who received 5 talents traded it, investing, we call it today. The servant who received the 2 talents made 2 talents more. And we don't know how that servant did it, but perhaps they invested in themselves and got a promotion or something. And then it's the servant who buried the 1 talent underground that made the master angry. And then the master gave extra talents to the ones who made money for him. And so I take a lot of it. I'm like, money is a tool. Money, we are God's portfolio managers. God, at the end of
Yes.
the day, has the power to give our money and take our money away. And our short time here on earth is to manage that money on his behalf. And when you rethink it in that way, it's like, if I'm God's portfolio manager, what would he want me to do with the money that he
Mm.
has endowed me? I think that can really, really bring fantastic perspective to anybody who's Christian and thinks that money is evil, into rethinking about what God's true intent with money is.
Yes, yes. God is the God of all resources. Was it Psalm 24:1? I think the earth is the Lord's and everything in it. That the resources of this world are like those belong to God, which means that they are not in and of themselves. They are not tainted or broken, or like God is using them as a part of His kingdom work, and it's exciting to have that kind of a perspective on money. Something that can go out of left, it can go down left field, and like bad things can happen there. But to know that, man, this is a tool, a resource that God can use to redeem and build and grow His kingdom, and to encourage His people, and to send them out and to do great work. And it's just very exciting that that's part of the partnership that you get to have with God. This world changing work that you get to be a part of with Him. And one of the questions that I ask all of my guests, and I know that there are many places that have influence on our lives, many things that have that God has used to point us in the direction that He wants us to go. But I do always want to ask guests, are there things that you look back on from your time with InterVarsity in particular that were training you up and preparing you for this calling that the Lord was working out in your life?
Yeah. I love how InterVarsity is very mission oriented in their teachings. And I recall even
Hmm.
as a freshman, our InterVarsity staff was talking about how, and I think he was maybe 10, 11 years ahead of us in age. He said how when he first graduated Harvard, and this was during the first tech boom, he, got super high offers from all the tech firms. And he's like, that can be also you guys' potential as Harvard graduates. You may also get these very, very tempting offers. And you kind of have to
Hmm.
compare that against, like, is it God's intent for you to take those offers? Now, he went off into a different tangent. He was trying to get people to do urban plunge and to do missions and stuff like that. And I
Uh
remember
huh.
fighting that all the time. I was like, I don't think I'm the kind of girl who wants to go off to India, have Delhi belly, and try to, bring the word of God that way. It's like, it's not me. I can't do it, God. And I prayed so hard through those years, like, God, I know you want me to do good, but please don't send me to Africa. I don't know why. I just had that like fear. Um,
Yeah.
so I went off and I did the Shang Manifesto. I, did the corporate job, the high paying job, and all of that. But it's funny that that memory comes back now, because I was like, okay, I did give up the manifesto. I gave up my corporate job. I gave
Hmm.
up my high earnings, and I'm doing something that I truly do feel God has called me to do. And I don't feel that fear. I don't feel like, oh my goodness, like God is plunging me into an unknown that I'm extremely uncomfortable with or whatnot. Um, and yes, I have, a great net worth behind it to to support all of this. But I guess like now the perspective is, yeah, those words from those early days of InterVarsity really stuck with me, that he does have a purpose for me. He was just going to
Mm,
use me at the right time in the right way. So I
yes.
followed the quote unquote the Harvard path for many, many years, but it didn't mean that that was going to be it forever. So
Yeah, Shung, as you think about your fellow InterVarsity alumni who are listening in to this story, do you have a word of encouragement from other alumni like you, whether it's in the realm of their finances or just in the realm of we're trying to figure out how it is it that God is inviting me to partner with him in his world-changing work in my context? Do you have a word of encouragement that you would give to them?
I've been recently praying to God a lot as well about going into the book tour, what all this is supposed to mean. And I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, I really don't know. I honestly don't know what I'm doing. All of this is really new to me. And God had been telling me, listen to the yes, find the yeses in your life. I was like, that's an interesting phrase. Like, look for the people who are saying yes, the people who are opening up their doors to you, and it might not be what you thought it was going to be. And so I perhaps pass that word to you guys as well, because God is going to open doors and windows and cracks in the most unusual places, such as you being pregnant, not ever giving a thought to writing a book, but getting that one little message saying, have you thought about writing a book? And I think that that's what's been getting me through the last year and a half of leaving this corporate life, where there is no structure, there is no to-do list, because I have to come up with that on my own. And so I'm really trying to walk by faith and hoping that I'm doing it for God's glory.
Yeah, I love that idea of following the yeses. What are the opportunities for yes that the Lord is placing in front of you? Shung, last two things. One, tell us where can we find your book, and two, how can we, as your alumni community, how can we keep praying for you as you continue following Jesus in this world changing work?
Thank you so much. What a kind way to offer that. If you are in the United States, you'll be able to find my book everywhere. So this includes Amazon, Barnes and Noble, but I like bookshop.org because they donate to your favorite independent local bookstore as part of their
Wow.
proceeds. Yeah, so everywhere. And I think for non-US based listeners, there is an international distribution of the book, but I don't know as much like how that works. As for
Okay.
prayers, I mean, I do deal with the number one tool the devil uses to win my heart. So I do ask that
Wow.
I continue to follow God and not make money my idol, despite the fact that I work with it every day, and that lives would be transformed through my work, that God would bring people into healing and to more towards his fold as a result of the stuff that I teach through Save My Sense.
That's awesome. We will make sure that those things make it into the show notes so that people can refer back to them, follow links, and keep praying. Shung, thank you so much thanks for kicking off our 2025 calendar of episodes. As we're thinking about the possibility of like, okay, I'd like to make some adjustments. I'd like to pursue better health in fill in the blank way. One of those ways for people so often is financial health. And so to be able to hear this kind of backstory, to have some really quality resources in your book and in the content that you develop on Instagram, knowing that we can point people in a trustworthy direction right here at the start of a new year, I'm so grateful that you joined us, and I'm so grateful for the ways that you are faithfully following Jesus in the ways that he's calling you to change the world around you. So, Shung, thanks so much.
Thank you, John.
Thanks for tuning in, alumni. Check the show notes for more information about today's guest and for ways that you could be praying for your fellow alum. If you know someone who needs to hear this story, take just a moment to share the episode with them, and then be sure to leave us a rating and a review as well. Now go change that world, alumni. Thanks for listening to InterVarsity World Changers. This podcast is brought to you by the InterVarsity Alumni Relations Team, hosted and produced by John Steele, production assistance by Mike Santera, edited by Caleb Leppert. And our theme song is Crazy by InterVarsity alumnus Andy Mineo.